Hi Army, it's me, Taehyung. Thank you for being here with me again. I hope you're safe, healthy, and surrounded by people who make you feel loved. Wherever you are right now, whether you're watching from your room, on your way somewhere, or staying awake even though it's late, I want you to know that I'm grateful. Sometimes life moves so fast that we forget to breathe, but tonight I want to slow down with you. I want to share a moment that happened recently, one that even I didn't expect. When I sat on The Tonight Show in front of Jimmy Fallon and millions of viewers, I thought it would be a normal interview, just laughs, music, and fun. But suddenly, I was asked a question that hit deeper than anyone realized. A question about trust. A question about Jimin and Jungkook. And in that moment, everything changed. Taehyung sat between Jimin and Jungkook on the sofa, pretending to relax, acting like everything was normal. Jimin leaned forward, excited and playful like always. Jungkook tapped his knee, trying to hide how nervous he felt on live television. And Taehyung, he simply smiled, though his chest felt tight, as if his body already knew what his mind wanted to deny. The interview started simple, funny questions, dance challenges, stories from their trainee days, the kind of things they had answered hundreds of times before. The crowd adored them. The energy was light, warm, safe, until suddenly, without warning, that warmth vanished. Jimmy shifted toward Taehyung with the brightest grin and the audience leaned in. They sensed something too. So, Taehyung, Jimmy said, pretending to be casual, but everyone knew he'd been waiting for this moment. There's something the world has always wondered, and tonight I want the truth. The crowd cheered. Jimin laughed. Jungkook covered his face, shaking his head as if begging, "Please don't do this." But it was too late. Jimmy lifted a card, looked Taehyung straight in the eyes, and asked, "Between Jimin and Jungkook, who do you trust more? You have to choose. Only one." The studio froze. Not one breath, not one whisper, only silence. Jimin's smile evaporated in an instant. Jungkook's hand dropped from his knee and he stared straight ahead like he'd just heard something he wasn't ready for. Taehyung's mind went blank. For a moment, the noise inside his head was louder than the audience that wasn't making a sound. He wanted to laugh it off, make it a joke. But the problem was simple. The question wasn't a joke. Not for him, not for any of them. Because they all knew the truth could hurt in more ways than one. And the truth was heavier than love, heavier than loyalty, heavier than the years they had survived together. Jimmy repeated the question. That's live TV. No passing. You have to answer Taehyung. Taehyung swallowed hard. Jimin's eyes slowly drifted toward him. Not with pressure, not with expectation, but with fear. The kind of fear only someone who loves deeply can feel. Jungkook didn't dare look at him. He was already bracing for impact. Taehyung tried to smile, but his voice trembled in his chest before it ever reached his mouth. He remembered the years with Jimin, the late-night conversations about their future, the moments when they cried together and hid their pain from the world. He remembered how Jimin sometimes broke himself trying to make others feel whole. Then he remembered Jungkook, the boy who grew into a man right beside him, the person who watched him closely whenever he pretended to be okay. Jungkook trusted Taehyung too much, maybe more than Taehyung deserved. They were both his brothers, his family, his history, his everything. But Jimmy didn't ask who he loved more. He asked who he trusted more. That was different. And that difference hurt. Taehyung took a deep breath, the kind of breath someone takes right before they break. His eyes closed just for a second, but that second was long enough for the world to know that whatever name he said would carry consequences, not for fans, not for the industry, but for the three souls sitting on that couch. Finally, Taehyung looked up, and when he spoke, the entire studio leaned forward because they already sensed that his answer would change something forever. My answer is. And the moment his voice reached those two syllables, Jimin's fingers slowly curled into fists on his lap. Jungkook exhaled sharply, like he'd already lost or already won. He didn't even know which one was worse. Taehyung forced himself to finish. My answer is Jungkook. No one moved. No applause. No reaction. Only shock. Jimin blinked once, twice. His smile tried to return but didn't make it past his lips. Jungkook's jaw tightened. He didn't look proud. He just looked wounded, like receiving trust was scarier than not receiving it. Taehyung's smile faltered, and in that moment, the world saw what only a few had ever seen. Taehyung didn't want to hurt anyone, but sometimes the truth hurts anyway. The cameras caught everything, Jimin's eyes turning away, Jungkook gripping the sofa, Taehyung trying not to fall apart on stage. Jimmy laughed to ease the tension, but it didn't work. The mood was broken painfully, beautifully, irreversibly broken, and the audience felt like they had witnessed something they were never supposed to see. That was the moment Taehyung realized something terrifying. Choosing someone didn't just protect the trust, he felt it destroyed the trust he didn't. This was the beginning. The moment the cameras cut to commercial, the sound of applause faded into something colder, something painfully real. Staff rushed across the stage, the band played transition music, and Jimmy tried to keep the energy light, but the damage was already done. No director, no editor, no PR team could reverse what had just happened. The truth had escaped on live television, and it was alive now, too late to take back. Jimin stood up first, not abruptly, not angrily, but slowly, almost gracefully, as if he didn't want anyone to see that his legs were shaking. He gave a polite bow to the staff and whispered something no one could hear, then walked off stage. Jungkook stayed frozen in his seat, staring down at his shoes like the ground had suddenly become the safest place in the world. Taehyung remained in the middle, trapped between the friend he had hurt and the friend he had chosen. A handler approached Taehyung and said the next segment would be pre-recorded backstage, but he barely processed the words. All he could think was that he needed to talk to Jimin now. He turned to follow him, but another staff member held him by the wrist and guided him toward the hallway. Taehyung, we need you for the next setup. Just a second, he tried to say, but they didn't hear him. Or maybe they ignored him on purpose. He looked back one more time. Jimin didn't turn around. Taehyung's chest tightened brutally. Backstage, the dressing room was quiet except for the muffled sound of cameras rolling in the distance. Jungkook entered first, sitting heavily on the sofa. Taehyung came in after him, closing the door behind them. The silence between them wasn't comfortable or warm. It was heavy, like rain that never fell. Jungkook didn't look up when he spoke. You shouldn't have chosen me. Taehyung froze. I didn't choose you to hurt him. You think I don't know that? Jungkook's voice cracked raw, sincere, and exhausted. But look what happened. He walked out because of your answer, and now everyone will say it's my fault. Taehyung sat down, hands clasped so tightly his knuckles turned white. It wasn't about him or you. It was about trust, not love. That's worse. Jungkook finally looked at him, and the expression in his eyes was heartbreaking. Because trust has responsibility. If you love me more, that would hurt him. But if you trust me more, that means I can lose that trust. I can fail you. I can disappoint you. His voice became thinner, more vulnerable. Being chosen doesn't feel good right now. It feels terrifying. Taehyung didn't know what to say. He wanted to comfort Jungkook, but every word he thought of might make things worse. Instead, he remained silently beside him, hoping his presence meant something. A soft knock interrupted them. It was Jimin's voice from the other side of the door. It's me. The word seemed to stop again. Jungkook immediately stood, ready to leave the room, but Jimin shook his head when the door opened. No, stay, both of you. Taehyung looked at Jimin, hoping for anything, anger, tears, a scream, anything he could react to. But what he saw was worse. Jimin looked calm, too calm. The kind of calm people wear when they're trying not to break. I'm not here to make this dramatic, Jimin said softly. I know it was an honest answer. I asked myself that question before too, you know? I knew what you would say. Taehyung felt his heart collapse on itself. Jimin, no, you don't understand. I understand perfectly, Jimin replied, still polite, still gentle. You trust Jungkook more. That doesn't mean you don't love me. I know that. But it still hurts. And I need time. I need space to feel this without pretending everything's fine. Jungkook stepped forward. Jimin, please don't blame Taehyung. I'm not blaming him. Jimin laughed once, softly, bitterly. I'm blaming reality, and we can't fight reality. Jimin walked toward Taehyung slowly, and when he stopped in front of him, his eyes glistened not with anger, but with sadness so deep it took the breath from Taehyung's lungs. Before tonight, I didn't realize how much I wanted you to choose me. That's the part that hurts. Taehyung stood up, feeling tears form in his throat before they reached his eyes. Jimin, I love you. I know, Jimin whispered. That's the problem. Love isn't enough this time. Everything inside Taehyung shattered in silence. No one cried, no one yelled. They were three people in the same room, all breaking in different directions. Jimin slowly reached out and placed a hand on Taehyung's shoulder, not to comfort him, but to say goodbye for now. We have rehearsal tomorrow, he said carefully. Let's be professional. Let's finish the job. And when it's done, we'll figure out what we are again. Then he walked out. The door closed with the softest click, yet it felt louder than any scream. Taehyung sank to the floor, hands covering his face, and Jungkook sat beside him as if afraid to touch him and afraid not to. Taehyung whispered through broken breath, I didn't want to lose anyone. Jungkook answered in barely a murmur. Sometimes truth costs something, and tonight it cost Jimin's heart. The knock of a staff member told them filming would resume soon. The world didn't care about their pain. The show had to go on. But nothing, not fame, not applause, not contracts, could erase the new reality. Before the episode, they were brothers. After the episode, they were strangers who still loved each other. This was no longer about a question on live TV. This was about what happens when love, loyalty, and trust collide and someone must pay the price. When the stage manager called them back, the three of them stepped onto the set like ghosts wearing human skin. The cameras were waiting, the audience was waiting, the world was waiting, and none of them had time to breathe, much less heal. BTS was a global phenomenon, and global phenomena don't get breaks just because their hearts are breaking. Jimin arrived first. His smile was flawless, perfect, professional, the kind of smile that wins hearts and hides pain. Jungkook followed, standing a little further away than usual, as if afraid to steal space that didn't belong to him. Taehyung came last, and though he tried to look composed, there was an emptiness in his eyes that no stylist could fix. The music started. The applause roared. Jimmy greeted them with high energy, but this time Taehyung heard something underneath that no one else did. A hint of regret. Jimmy knew he had crossed a line. It was great television, but it was awful reality. He rushed through the next questions, avoiding anything personal. The show had become purely scripted, now safe, emotionless, mechanical. But even that couldn't hide the tension. When they laughed, it wasn't laughter. When they looked at each other, it wasn't connection. It was survival. During the game segment, Jimin and Jungkook ended up standing next to each other while Taehyung stood several feet away. That wasn't choreography. It was instinct, a subconscious attempt to avoid more damage. The fans watching from their screens probably thought it was cute or funny. They had no idea that something was breaking right in front of them. At one moment, Jimmy handed Taehyung a microphone and asked him to sing a short snippet of a song, something romantic and lighthearted. Taehyung forced a smile and agreed. But when the instrumental started playing, something unexpected happened. Taehyung didn't look at the audience. He didn't look at Jimmy. He looked at Jimin. It wasn't planned. It wasn't for the cameras. It was impulse desperation. The lyrics were simple yet devastating. I never meant to let you down. Jimin froze. His eyes shimmered, and for 2 seconds, the pain wasn't hidden anymore. Jungkook looked at Taehyung too, but the expression on his face wasn't jealousy. It was heartbreak for both of them. The person Taehyung trusted most was the person who now felt like a wall between him and the person he loved differently. When the song ended, the crowd exploded with applause. Not because they understood, but because they didn't. After the show wrapped, they thanked Jimmy and the staff like nothing happened. Photos were taken, autographs were signed, fan greetings were recorded. They were perfect, the world's biggest group, still shining. No one knew it wasn't shine. It was damage reflecting light. The limousine ride back to the hotel was the quietest car ride of their lives. Jimin sat on the far left side, head leaning against the window, staring at the city that blurred past them. Jungkook sat on the far right, elbows on his knees, breathing slow like he was holding himself together by force. Taehyung sat between them, his body the bridge, his heart the battlefield. No one spoke. not for minutes, not for miles. Then, quietly, Jimin broke the silence. Did you really mean what you said? It wasn't angry, it wasn't manipulative. It was a question from someone trying to understand and maybe to forgive. Taehyung wiped his palms on his jeans to stop the shaking. Yes, I did, but that doesn't mean I trust you less. It just means that Jungkook sees me in a way that's hard to explain. Jungkook stiffened. Don't say it like that. It sounds like something I took from him. Jimin's voice softened. You didn't take anything. I lost. That's all. Taehyung broke then, not with tears, but with words. I don't want to lose either of you. Jimin turned to him. Then why does choosing always feel like losing? Taehyung didn't have an answer. Because there wasn't one. When they reached the hotel, paparazzi were waiting outside. Flashing lights blinded them. Reporters shouted their names. Fans screamed with love that sounded like thunder. And just like that, the real world forced them to disappear behind performance again. Taehyung wrapped his arm loosely around Jimin because the cameras demanded closeness. Jungkook leaned into Taehyung because headlines demanded unity. To the world, they looked like family. But under the surface, everything was cracked. Inside the elevator, doors closed, cameras gone, flashes silent. Jimin whispered something that felt like a dagger wrapped in silk. Taehyung, if trust is the reason you chose him, then what place do I have? Taehyung answered without thinking and without knowing that his answer would be the one thing Jimin would never forget. You're the one I need. Silence exploded. Jungkook looked away, devastated. Jimin's lips parted, not in happiness, but in confusion, because the words weren't enough to erase the pain and too much to ignore. The elevator dinged. Their floor arrived. They stepped out not as three friends, but as three people whose love no longer fit in the same shape. That night in New York would become the moment they never talked about because talking would make it real. And it was about to get worse. Tomorrow, rehearsal would force them to face each other again, not as idols, not as brothers, but as hearts that were breaking in three different ways. Morning came like punishment. New York City's sunlight flooded through the hotel windows, ruthless and bright, exposing everything that people tried to hide. For Taehyung, sleep had never arrived. He lay awake the entire night, staring at the ceiling, replaying the interview over and over until the memory became unbearable. If he closed his eyes, he heard Jimin's voice. If he opened them, he saw Jungkook's expression. There was no escape. Rehearsal was scheduled for 9 a.m. By 8:55, Taehyung was already inside the studio. Not because he was eager, but because he couldn't bear the weight of waiting. He sat on the bench, tapping his fingers against his leg, trying to look normal, trying to breathe. Crew members walked around, adjusting lights, sound techs tuned microphones, but he hardly noticed. All he could hear was the sound of his own pulse. The door opened. Jungkook walked in first. He didn't say good morning. Taehyung didn't either. They didn't need to pretend with each other. The silence said everything. Jungkook looked tired, not physically, but emotionally, like his heart had run a marathon and lost. He took his position on the left side of the stage, stretching silently, preparing for choreography that his body knew but his mind wasn't ready for. Then the second door opened. Jimin walked in. His expression was unreadable. not angry, not distant, just controlled. He greeted the staff politely, smiled when they complimented his outfit, but his eyes never once drifted toward Taehyung or Jungkook. It was the kind of politeness that hurt more than hostility. The choreography track began to play upbeat, fun, energetic, the opposite of what any of them felt. Still, they pushed through the motions. They danced in sync, bodies moving perfectly even while their hearts weren't. People on set smiled in admiration, whispering about how professional they were. But perfection doesn't survive long when emotion is bleeding underneath. Halfway through the routine, there was a moment in the choreography where Taehyung and Jimin were supposed to look at each other, a playful, brotherly exchange. They'd done it hundreds of times. It was normally effortless. Today, it was impossible. Jimin turned his head slightly too late. Taehyung hesitated slightly too early. The timing didn't match. The music kept going, but their connection didn't. Next came the moment when Jungkook leaned into Taehyung's shoulder during a vocal transition. It was part of the routine, brief but intimate, a fan favorite. This time, Jungkook hesitated so visibly that a backup dancer bumped into him and the music stopped. The choreographer frowned. Guys, again. They restarted from the top, and again, Jimin looked away from Taehyung. Again, Jungkook held back from the shoulder lean. Again, the routine fell apart like a broken promise. After the third attempt, the choreographer snapped, "What's going on? You three are never out of sync." Silence, the kind of silence that wasn't confusion, it was confession without words. The choreographer raised an eyebrow. "If there's a problem, fix it. We don't have time for..." Jimin interrupted quietly. "It's not a choreography problem, it's a trust problem." The room froze. Taehyung flinched like he'd been slapped, even though Jimin's tone was soft, not angry. Jungkook took a step forward, ready to defend Taehyung again, but Jimin lifted his hand. "Don't. I don't want excuses. I don't want explanations. I just want honesty." He looked at Taehyung for the first time that day. "Do you regret choosing him?" The question shouldn't have been asked here. Not in a studio, not in front of staff, not while cameras were prepped, but pain has terrible timing. Taehyung shook his head instantly. "No, I don't regret the answer. I regret the pain it caused." Jungkook muttered under his breath. "That's the same thing." Jimin stepped closer to Taehyung, voice trembling despite his calm face. "I'm not asking you to take it back. I'm asking you something else." Taehyung waited terrified. Jimin swallowed. "Do you trust me less because I hurt you before? Because I wasn't there when you were struggling? Is that why?" It felt like the air vanished from the room. Jungkook closed his eyes because he knew the question had been hiding in Jimin's chest for a long time, buried under smiles and jokes and affection. Taehyung stepped forward, heart pounding so hard he felt it in his throat. His voice shook, not because he was weak, but because he was finally telling a truth he had avoided for years. "It's not because you hurt me. It's because I hurt myself every time I pretended I wasn't." Jimin's breath caught. Taehyung continued, unstoppable now, breaking open in front of everyone. "You don't know this, Jimin, but sometimes I looked at you and felt like I had to be perfect to deserve you. You shine so bright that I always felt like I was standing in your light, not next to you. And instead of telling you how I felt, I hid it." I acted like I was okay, and the more I lied to myself, the less I trusted myself around you. Jimin's eyes filled instantly, not with anger, but with heartbreak. Taehyung's voice cracked. I trusted Jungkook because with him, I never had to pretend I was okay. He saw through me even when I didn't want him to. He didn't need me to be strong to love me. Jungkook's shoulders fell not from pride but from pain. Taehyung turned toward him. But that doesn't mean I love you more, Jungkook. It means you know my weakness, and that scares me too. Then his voice dropped to barely a whisper. I never chose between you. I chose between the parts of myself. There it was, the truth deeper than the live TV answer. A truth years in the making. The choreographer, the dancers, the staff, everyone stood frozen, watching something far more intimate than a performance. Jimin's voice broke first. Why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't want to lose you, Taehyung whispered. And now you did, Jimin replied, a tear rolling down his cheek. Jungkook stepped back from both of them, tears gathering in his eyes too. We are all hurting and none of us know how to stop it. A staff member entered with terrible timing. 10 minutes until cameras. The world didn't wait for them to heal. They wiped their faces, they fixed their microphones, they took their places. When the music started again, they danced perfectly, too perfectly, like people who had no choice but to perform even while their hearts were bleeding. Nothing collapsed physically, but something collapsed emotionally, silently, permanently. This wasn't the night that changed everything. This was the morning that proved it wasn't going away. Taehyung took a deep breath as the applause for the commercial break faded, and for a moment he felt the studio quiet around him. There was something about silences on live television that didn't feel silent at all. Millions of eyes waiting, millions of opinions ready, millions of assumptions preparing to run wild. Yet in that gravity, Taehyung's mind was somewhere else entirely. It wasn't on the cameras, it wasn't on the Tonight Show stage, it wasn't even on Jimmy Fallon. It was on two familiar names, Jimin and Jungkook. He could still hear Jimmy's voice echoing in his head, playful but heavy with implication. Who do you trust more, Jimin or Jungkook? The question was framed like a game, like harmless entertainment. But Taehyung knew how the world worked. Every word he said would become a headline before sunrise. Every blink would be analyzed. Every laugh would be romanticized or weaponized. In that seat under the bright lights, he was not just Taehyung, he was BTS Taehyung, global idol, a man whose personal feelings had become a stage for the world to dissect. And yet, inside him, he wasn't confused. He wasn't debating between two names. He was reliving memories. There was Jimin the boy whose warmth felt like home from the very beginning. The friend who saw him in his worst moments, who stayed up all night when Taehyung lost loved ones, who hugged him before he ever learned how to talk about his pain. The friend who sacrificed sleep, comfort, and even personal dreams just to make sure Taehyung didn't shatter. Jimin wasn't simply someone he trusted, Jimin saved him. And the world would never truly understand how real that was. There was also Jungkook, the one who challenged him, pushed him, argued with him, laughed with him, protected him, and stood behind him even when no one else knew how. The boy who wouldn't let him give up, who dragged him out of doubts and stage anxiety even when he pretended he didn't need help. Jungkook wasn't simply someone he trusted. Jungkook held him up when he didn't have the strength to admit he was falling. How could someone choose? How could a lifetime of brotherhood be reduced to one name? The red light on the camera blinked again live. Jimmy came back with that signature grin, but Taehyung could tell there was caution behind it now. Even Jimmy could feel the weight of the moment. The audience leaned in. The band grew quiet. Staff members off camera froze. Taehyung looked up, and at that moment, he didn't try to hide what he felt. His eyes softened not with hesitation, but with honesty. Jimmy repeated the question slowly this time. Who do you trust more, Jimin or Jungkook? A ripple of reactions flickered across the audience, but Taehyung remained still. It was like he'd stepped out of time. His voice didn't tremble, it didn't joke, it didn't protect himself. It told the truth. I can't compare them, he said softly, because they are both the kind of people you only meet once in a lifetime. The room didn't move. It didn't breathe. Taehyung continued, his tone deeper, more emotional than anyone expected. When I say I'm grateful, people think it's just something idols say. But I'm standing here today because I was lucky enough to grow up with people who would walk through fire for me. Jimin and Jungkook didn't just trust me. They taught me how to trust myself again. A gasp rolled across the crowd, not dramatic like in movies, but genuine. It was the sound of people realizing that they had just seen something raw, real, and unfiltered. Jimmy blinked, visibly moved, and even he didn't try to force humor back into the moment. Taehyung didn't look at the camera then. He didn't look at Jimmy. He looked down at his hands, the hands that had held microphones and trophies and expectations for so many years. People always want to choose, he added, voice calm yet unshakably sure. They want to say who's closer, who's better, who's more important. But the truth is, without both of them, I wouldn't be me. Silence then applause, not wild and chaotic like earlier, but heartfelt, emotional, respectful. Jimmy gently touched Taehyung's arm, whispering, "Thank you for saying that," his voice breaking just enough to show that he meant it. The cameras were still rolling, but the show no longer felt like a performance. It felt like a confession disguised as entertainment. And Taehyung could sense it everywhere. The staff, the audience, the energy in the air. The world wasn't only watching BTS's V, they were watching Kim Taehyung, the human being, and for once, that was enough. But just as his heart settled, as if the show wanted to test him even further, another question flashed on the teleprompter. He hadn't seen it coming. Jimmy hadn't even rehearsed it with him. Someone, maybe producers, maybe executives, wanted the moment to go viral. The next question wasn't just personal, it was dangerous. The teleprompter read, "If you could only keep one person by your side forever, who would it be?" Jimmy's eyes widened. He hadn't chosen that question. Taehyung froze. The audience waited again. The atmosphere stiffened. The room teetered between heartwarming reality and emotional disaster. Taehyung wasn't ready for this one. And for the first time during that interview, he didn't know whether the truth might actually break everything. Have felt trapped. And to ARMY, you've been a part of that strength too. You love me even when you didn't know everything happening behind the curtain. You stayed when I was smiling, and you stayed when I was hurting quietly. If you're listening to me right now, I want you to remember something. So tonight, I'm not choosing between them. I'm choosing gratitude. I'm choosing the version of myself they helped me become. And if I could give something back to the world, it would be this message. Find the people who make you feel safe to be yourself and don't ever let them go. Thank you for staying beside me, ARMY. Thank you for loving me not just as Taehyung from BTS, but as Kim Taehyung, the human. Wherever you are right now, I hope tonight you feel less alone.